Hello, friends. How are you? How's things? How's life? How's your world? It's Friday. You got anything planned for the weekend? We have softball, for sure. I'll probably also be doing some of this weekend. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I just watched a video, a really interesting video about, like, it was about, like, kind of the idea of the shed, right? My shed, but not my shed in particular, but just the idea of having a shed. And it talked about, the man who sits in the chair in his workshop and does nothing and just sits there. And it talked about the psychology of that and how some people might see that as being something wrong. Hold on. Talking about how that, that might just be like a problem, like he's having a break, like a mental break. But that's not true. And that's kind of the point of the video. The video was kind of going down the path of, like, this is actually like an important part of healing for a lot of men because they grew up without the pathways to connect emotion to language. Like, it's literally possible that there are men, I should say, it is literally possible that there are men who cannot vocalize their feelings. They just don't have the capacity to do so. Experimenting here with me. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was a really... I thought that was a really good thought process. Good thought, because, I grew up. My dad was a very not vocal person. We've talked about that before. He didn't share his emotions openly. He didn't. He seemed to not have language for that. But I couldn't have told you that as a kid, like that was what was going on. I was hoping I'd be able to get more volume out of this setup. Guess not. Okay. I've told you that my father was a man who didn't share a lot of emotion. But I also knew a guy. I had a neighbor that I called John, or well, that was his name. That's why I called him that. I called him Daddy John because I spent a lot of time at Daddy John's house, and Daddy John had two spaces that he loved spending time in, and one was his porch. He had a porch swing, and he would pretty much always be on his porch swing. And then he had his shed. He had like a literal one of those like metal sheds with the doors on it that really suck. And that shed was like, I can remember there was just no room in it. You'd pull the doors open. It was really hard to get them open. They stuck. They were terrible. And there was a little workbench and a little stool and a little tiny TV, like this big, old CRT TV. And that was about, like, you could step into the shed and that was it. The rest was just full of stuff. And John would often spend time in one of those two places. And I can remember being a kid, like, he spent a lot of time on his porch, just on his porch swing. He'd have a glass of probably whiskey. I'm not really sure. I didn't understand that what he was drinking was alcohol at that time. And he just spent a lot of time out there just doing nothing. Just existing. And I definitely didn't understand it as a kid. But as an adult, I get it. And I think about those two scenarios, my father and John just existing in the world. And I wonder if that still exists. It's not something I do. I don't often just sit in silence. I will say that a lot of times when I don't have anything to talk about, I'll come down here and I'll sit for a little bit and something will show up. And maybe that's part of that process. Maybe that's part of that just like need to be outside of it for a moment process. I'm not sure. But I guess where I'm going with this is, do those men still exist? Like, are there men in your life who sit in a chair by themselves in a garage and just exist? Is that still a thing for anybody out there? Do you know anybody like that? I saw somebody do this on the internet the other day and I wanted to try it. I'm basically splitting the output of my fuzz pedal and bringing it back in on itself, and in theory it'll turn itself into a sort of a tone generator. Oh. Okay, so it does. It does essentially self-oscillate. Okay, I'll be playing with that for sure. That's a fun use of my time. Anyway, distraction central here today. Are there men in your life that just sit and stare off into nothingness? Are you one of those men? Did you inherit that habit from the men in your life? I'm curious. It's not something I inherited. My father, I don't know that my father ever really sat alone by himself and did nothing. My father was always, he was the TV dad. He loved sports. He loved his programs. He loved just sitting in his chair watching TV. And I don't know that he was actively watching TV. He was probably often passively watching TV. But I didn't really inherit that. I definitely have spent time of my life just sitting and existing, and I enjoy doing that on a riverbank or in a calming environment. And maybe in here is the calming environment. The video suggested that like this is a space of creation and just being in a space where you can make things or you can achieve things, and then just existing in that space without actively trying to achieve or create set your mind in this particular situation. I don't know if that's necessarily true for me. I would be much more akin to sit idle in the woods than I would be to sit idle in here, because sitting idle in here, am I really accomplishing anything? I don't know. I would probably think of 1,000 things I could do instead of sitting idle. And so maybe being in a space like this isn't correct for me, but it might be correct for others. So I'm curious. I definitely remember growing up with a lot of men who sat in folding chairs and silence and watching that and understanding that to be like a sacred time and a sacred place. It's just not something I ever grew into. Curious about you and your experiences with that, especially the people in your life. Did you have that sort of experience? Do you have that sort of experience still? Let me know in the comments. You can tell me what you're going to get up to this weekend. Like I said, I will probably end up in here quite a bit this weekend doing this stuff. Not sure yet how much time I'm going to have to do that. I do have some new songs I need to prep for the band. So I will be working on new songs. But yeah. And I'm probably going to try to build a small pedal board for the new ambient setup, and I just got a power supply for that. Get that project underway. Yeah. Let me know what you're doing. Put it in the comments. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you, as always. You guys are great. You're my best friends. Thank you for that. Like, subscribe. See you tomorrow. See you Monday. Today's 1,000 plus little things happy, successful people do differently. We are learning. Okay. We are learning 31 morning journal prompts that will change the way you think, and we are on day 6. As we mentioned in the introduction, it's funny how we outgrew what we once thought we couldn't live without, and then we fall in love with what we didn't even know we wanted. Life keeps leading us on journeys we would never go on if we were up to us. Don't be afraid, have faith, find the lessons, trust the journey. Yeah, I'm not going to read the prompt because I don't think we need to read the prompt. Definitely, nothing ever turns out the way you expect, and I think that's the magic of it. And so, do things you expect. Maybe do things you don't expect because you might, or do things you're afraid of because you might find that the outcome is very different from what you expected, and in a good way.